right, good afternoon and welcome to what is expected to be a very interesting and relevant panel discussion today on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Pro AV space. My name is Tracy Schaefer and I work with Exertis Almo on PR and media relations. It is my great pleasure to introduce the session, How to Start a Dialogue About Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which will cover the necessity of a DEI plan and consequences of not having one. We're also going to talk about how DEI has created tremendous design, product, and installation opportunities for AV pros. We'll focus on some tips to design for neurodiversity, inclusivity, and meeting equity. Moderating the panel today is Melody Craigmyle, who is Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Almo Corporation. One of the primary creators of the E4 Experience brand and a recipient of Dealer Scope's 2022 Powerful Women in Technology. Our panelists include Kim Lonas, Kim is the Global Diversity and Inclusion Program Lead for Exertis and a member of Avixa's Diversity Council. Kim was also integral in the creation of the new Avixa Mosaic Scholarship, which is awarded to individuals with diverse backgrounds. And then Alesia Hendley is also on our panel today. Alesia is a multimedia journalist and social media influencer. She is a prominent and energetic, well-known voice in AV. And last, we have Rob Voorhees, who is the Business Development Manager for Exertis Almo, and also a member of Avixa's Diversity Council. We'll have time available for questions at the end of the discussion. And with that, I'll turn it over to our moderator, Melody Craigmyle.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. Thanks so much. Thanks for those attending today. And thanks to my panelists for being here with me as well. We did this last year in Boston for the first time and decided it was a great way to continue the dialogue. So had lots of great feedback after that session, so just kind of wanted to continue on this path, talking about diversity, equity, inclusion in this industry. So I am going to start out with Kim, and true to the topic here, just really wanted to talk about some of the basics. You know, Kim, how did you start the conversation with employees of DCC/Exertis and Almo about what is DE&I, and on just a very fundamental level, how do you explain that to people? How do you get that conversation going?
Sure. So, is that working? Nope. Can you hear me? Diversity. Clearly not tech savvy. I do work for a technology company. Don't hold it against me. It's easier talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion than working a microphone. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, are the programs and policies that a company puts in place to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. And to start the conversation, really, you have to start at the top of the organization. You need to have buy-in from your most senior leaders within the organization, and it can't be, well, this is what I believe diversity, equity, inclusion is. It has to be, here's the definitions, what does it mean to you, and how do we take that understanding and cascade it through the business. And if you don't have that buy-in at the most senior level, it does pose a bit of a challenge, but you can't just start at the top and then assume that that's going to be the best thing for your business. You also have to work at all levels within the organization to have true understanding of what diversity is, the differences that are in departments, differences in people, and how do you create a level playing field for all of those individuals that come into the business with diverse backgrounds so that they can truly feel included.
And I would suspect that working your way from that executive level down, one of the questions that comes up is, you know, what are the financial and cultural consequences of ignoring DE&I in the workplace? Because, you know, leaders are obviously looking for what does it mean across the organization from a cultural standpoint, a financial standpoint, and how do you explain that to people?
Yeah, there are so many studies that have been done by McKinsey. Harvard Business Review has published a number of studies. And when we look at the benefits of DE&I within a workplace, companies that have a program in place that's thriving are 35% more likely to have financial success compared to their competitors. So when you talk about that at the highest level, it's who doesn't want to be 35% more competitive and more financially have financial rewards than their competitors. And then from a cultural standpoint, when we talk about business, recruiting often comes up. I hear today it's so difficult to identify new talent. It's so difficult to recruit people into a business. Well, if you have communities within your business that are diverse and equitable and inclusive, you're going to retain your employees. So retention is going to be a big win when it comes to DE&I, because people aren't going to want to leave. And I can tell you, when you look at millennials today, oftentimes they're looking at the types of programs that a business has before they go to work for them. They want to understand, they want to have purpose in what they're doing. And so again, it's a retention tool.
Mm-hmm. And Alicia, just kind of breaking this down on more of a local, a pro-EV level, tell us your experience of what you've seen over the past, 4 to 5 years in terms of what have you seen the industry do to embrace this, and what are some of the work that you've done and maybe you've seen other manufacturers do to help bring this into the fold?
Yeah, I think over the last 4 or 5 years, DEI was a buzzword at a point in time just because of what was happening around the country, in the world, right? It was something that we could talk freely about or started to talk more freely about, and actually noticing that AV wasn't necessarily the most diverse industry across the board, right? I think it just became more noticeable as more horrible things started happening in the world. Like, I hate to say that, but it helped push things forward a little bit, and over the years, we've had more open discussions behind closed doors and on stages like this, which is helping bring more awareness to the forefront, becoming more comfortable having these kind of conversations like, yeah, I might be the only woman, or yeah, I might be the only person of color, or I might, I'm neurodiverse, I might not fit in with this crowd because of things that I'm dealing with internally, right? There's so many forms of diversity, and I think there's room for growth, but we are starting the conversations, and we're having a lot more engaging discussions on how we can do better, and I think that is the main focus point. A good starting point is continuing to raise this awareness and not be afraid to shy away from these kind of conversations. So part of what I do on a personal level is look for more women, look for younger people, look for older people that I can also pull on as well, and try and elevate those voices in everything that I do.
Mm-hmm. And Rob, so I know one of your new positions on the AVIXA, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, you're on this new committee, which I applaud AVIXA for. And I know something that's very near and dear to your heart is neurodiversity. So maybe you could just share with the audience what does that mean, and maybe just from a personal standpoint, how this has impacted your life and subsequently your contributions.
Well, so the interesting thing about that is that all stemmed from this panel at E4 Boston. So I show up to the panel, and to be honest, the term neurodiversity never meant anything to me. For those of you who don't know, I have a 15-year-old daughter who's on the autism spectrum, and one of the first slides of that presentation talked about autism. And you wound up seeing how excited I was to be there and listen. And so coming back to my office after that event, did some research and was ecstatic to find that AVIXA actually had a diversity council where you can get more involved, you can talk about these topics with like-minded individuals. And what both Kim and Alesia have already said is, to me, it's all about the education and the awareness of it. That's where you're going to start to see more integrators, keeping that front of mind, because it's not one size fits all. Certainly just from speaking on an autism level, my daughter, I learn something new from her every single day, and she's 15 and a freshman in high school. So it keeps you on your toes, and I like saying that because as an integrator, you constantly want to adapt to the industry. You never want to be left behind. You want to make sure that you're providing the best solution for your customers, and neurodiversity is such a big piece of that. So I think it might have actually been Kim that said this on the panel in Boston, is it's not a disability, it's an ability. And I look at what my daughter does now that she's starting to apply for internships and kind of get her name out there a little bit, that she is absolutely remarkable. You know, straight A's in school, she's perfect with numbers, but get her around the wrong type of lighting or loud noises in an office, and she might not be the best employee because there's outside hindrances to that. So the more awareness we bring to those types of abilities, the better, and that applies for even outside of Pro AV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, you know, part of what we want to move the AV industry forward into, and I was having an interesting conversation earlier today about where I see the industry going, is that we really want to be on the front end of the design side, to be that trusted advisor. And the more that we can bring awareness to neurodiversity and what lighting and what sound does and how that affects these employees, and maybe that's bringing in sound masking or different things. I think that that is part of our duty, is to create awareness around this. So from a product standpoint, Alesia, where do you see manufacturers maybe filling in some of the gaps of what we can do to address specifically neurodiversity and creating environments that are more inclusive?
Again, it goes back to the awareness, right? Product developers need to be aware of these certain diversities that are in place, right? Things they're going up against. If someone is not aware of their own unconscious bias in developing these products, that's where there's kind of a barrier, right? So manufacturers, when we start looking at it from a holistic perspective, going into a design and creating a product, and how is this product going to fit into certain environments, how is this product going to help or hinder people, that's where it needs to start, really at the product development level, and being aware of all of these different issues that come into play in the workforce.
Mm-hmm. But there's also some fundamental things that we're obligated to through American Disabilities Act that many integrators maybe aren't aware of, that we need to be bringing forward to clients, such as assisted listening devices.
Yep.
You know, what are
Absolutely.
those requirements, and how do we make sure that those are put in place?
Right, and I think in the past, a lot of manufacturers look at it as disabilities, right, from necessarily handicap accessible type of things. And we need to take that further when we're looking into neurodiversity and other forms of diversity, especially when it comes to listening assistant systems. Those have to be compliant within different venues, so everybody can be included in the conversation, right? And it goes beyond signing. It goes just be having certain devices. There's multiple ways you can approach these conversations, and multiple ways you can approach it with different types of technology that are here on the show floor too, which is great, because that's how you have to go into the design. You have to be open-minded, but also be aware of how many different people could be in one venue at one single time.
I think there's also been this new way of talking about equity, and that's been called meeting equity, right? So for people who are working at home or working in the office or working hybrid, and I know this is something in Exertis Almo we've kind of been dealing with. How do you make sure that everybody in the meeting room can hear or are included in the dialogue and into the narrative? And a lot of that has been on integrators finding out ways to make sure that the connectivity there, and Rob, we can come back to you about bandwidth in a minute. I know you've got lots to say on that, but what have you been, from an HR standpoint, what have you guys been talking about in terms of the meeting rooms and making sure people are included? And I know that that's been a topic, at least within our organization. I know a lot of other organizations are talking about it as well.
Interesting. Yeah, meeting equity is buzzwords that we've recently heard in the industry. And I think when we look at that, we have to accommodate different different individuals who may not actually be in the room with you, who are now on screen. Perhaps they have a hearing disability. So what can we do to make sure our screens are on? So if they have to read lips, or if they aren't able to, do they have the types of headphones necessary to assist with that, or visually on the screen? There's also individuals who may not be able to see 100%, and we do have a number of people within our business who experience that, so it's important to share what's happening in the room verbally to them so that they have an understanding, as well as from a technology standpoint. I don't know that I know all the answers, but I can tell you, when I look at like neurodiversity, which we were talking about, neurodiversity is the differences in brain function and how people think. So for my daughter, for example, not my daughter Sam, but my youngest daughter has visual snow. So when she's on classroom meetings, she sees in pixels. So she has to have a different color screen to kind of help mute out what she's seeing so that it's clearer for her. So I think it's, from an HR standpoint, it's not waiting for somebody to come to you and say, this is what I need. It's saying, these are the products that are available to you to help you in ensuring that meeting equity. And I think as an industry, that's something we should make suggestions when we're in with our clients, to say, hey, are you aware of this product or that product? Because they just may not know. Even myself, we have a business in the UK, and after Rob did a talk on neurodiversity for our company, and afterwards I received a number of phone calls, and one in particular was a business that had, that's what they did, they supplied different products for not just neurodiverse but differently abled individuals, and I had no clue. And so then it was like this whole laundry list of products that could be made available within our industry. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
I have a question. I'm not the moderator, so
Please.
This
This is an open conversation.
So Kim, from that perspective, when you're thinking about this, I guess you say laundry list of products.
Yeah.
In HR, when somebody's onboarded, there's all these checklists. Is the checklist of technology included as well?
From my experience, the technology that's listed, computer, monitor, keyboard, it doesn't say, do they need a specialty keyboard to address whatever their difference is. It just has the basics. So this is something that has to happen and educate within the business. Absolutely.
I think when I think of hardware, and we've spoken about this before, is the idea of possibly including, not just new hire kits, but when we talk about meeting equity and bandwidth, as Melody kind of addressed, is a big piece of that, but also making sure that maybe all employees have the same type of camera or the same headphones, just so you don't have, one or two people on the call struggling with a PC camera while everybody else looks like they're in a studio. So I think the hardware is a big component of that companies, again, we're starting to educate more, we're starting to make those recommendations so they know to at least start thinking about it and addressing it.
I think that the thing that people have been talking about in terms of meeting equity is that we don't want to move back from where we were, right? When we all went to work from home, it was a thing where everybody was on camera, and after a few weeks, we got good microphones, and thank you to our audio partners for bringing those and donating a lot of equipment and stuff. But, now that we're getting back, I know especially from where we were, it used to be a thing where people would say, well, when's the next time you're going to be in Philadelphia? Let's have a meeting. And it was like, well, why do I have to be there physically? Like, why can't we have a meeting over Zoom or whatever? And it just wasn't the culture, right? And so then COVID happens, and then all of a sudden, people are more included in the meetings. And I think one thing that we learned is, like, let's not go backwards. Let's not go back into these offices and then these people here, you know, are excluded from the dialogue or excluded from the narrative. Let's make sure that all of the conference rooms are outfitted with, again, the same equipment that everybody can use. They can be equitably a part of the meetings and not excluded just because they're working from home or working for a remote office. And I think a lot of our partners have been working very hard to create easy to use products that are plug and play and can help people do that very easily, because, you know, a lot of folks aren't highly technical. I mean, a lot of us that are kind of worked in the AV industry are used to doing that. And I remember the story you were telling about holding up to your wife who's a teacher. This is the HDMI cable, honey. You're like showing her how to plug things in. And
at this point, with my wife did, not to get sidetracked, but she did a Zoom call with her school the other day, and it was after hours, and I said, you can use my home office if you need to. And she sits down with my double monitors, my boom stand that I have, and my speakers. She goes, I don't know how to touch any of this. So she left and went up and did it on her phone instead. So it's, you know, but I think what Exertis Almo did that was so great, to Melody's point, is we're utilizing what we have at our disposal. We have these warehouses full of all of this great gear, USB, plug and play, even some of the more advanced products. And it really afforded us the opportunity to not have to take a step back and kind of look towards the future. And I think that's what a lot of people are still doing now.
so Kim and Rob, and tell us a little bit more about what the DE&I Council at Avixa is doing, and how can people get involved in that, and, you know, what is the mission, and what part do you see them playing in this initiative, and also about the Mosaic Scholarship too.
So the Avixa Diversity Council has been, I want to say 4.5 years now since it started. And initially it was to bring individuals of diverse backgrounds together. And what's interesting, when I first joined the council, which was probably about 6 months after they had launched, I went into it thinking, oh, diversity, okay, I'm ethnically diverse, this is for me. And I went in thinking, okay, gender is diverse, race is diverse, and I have to say the Avixa Diversity Council really opened my eyes, and I think that's a big driver for them to educate what diversity is, because it is more than race, it is more than gender. There's so many layers to diversity that, you know, they're trying to address that every day in different ways. And actually the council chair who worked at your company, we have a lot of different conversations about how we're going to educate the industry, and they're doing an ongoing series of educational pieces as tied to allyship, which is coming up this month. You know, what does it mean to be an ally within the industry or to individuals who are diverse? And then as far as Mosaic Scholarship, every year they choose a number, they open up the scholarship to students who have an interest in the Pro AV industry, and they submit, and then they select, I think this year they selected 3 different individuals, and Exertis Almo was kind enough to make a donation towards that scholarship fund. And it's just exciting to see, individuals who are typically underrepresented in the industry given an opportunity to learn from the industry. So.
And I think, to me, again, I joined simply because I now saw where Pro AV was headed, and it's exciting to be able to continue to hear other individuals that might be in the same position I am. I mean, I think certainly from the calls that I've been on, we all kind of share the same passion for DEI in this industry, but also just making our colleagues and our customers just feel welcome and comfortable. And that's been a big thing that Exertis Almo has done personally, is when you have these conversations and you create this awareness, it makes everybody feel more comfortable speaking out and speaking up, and it's a very powerful thing to be comfortable in your own skin. And I see firsthand, again, relating to my daughter, that when she's uncomfortable, she'll completely shut down. But if she's in the right atmosphere and feels comfortable around the people she's with, it's absolutely remarkable to see her do that. So you apply that to people in the AV industry who are either accountants or designing these high-tech systems. Get them in the right space and make sure that they're comfortable and feel accepted, and they're going to do great things. And that's what we need in this industry.
Alesia, what would you like to see this industry do to move forward, to foster this agenda, and who are the people that you would call on to take on this initiative?
That's a big question. People to call on. I think we've looked to associations for a very long time to be the ones to do the work. But I think it's all of our individual initiatives to find new voices, to amplify new voices, to find new people, actively go out and find younger people to come into this industry. I think that's on all of our shoulders, right? It's not just an association that's leading our industry. That's every individual's, that's our responsibility to do that. What I would like to see is when we can get to the point to where it's past awareness and it's past education, and we actively find a way to retain people, right? The scholarship is great. People are going to come. They're going to, just like the E4, you come inspired and you leave intrigued, or you're intrigued when you come and you leave inspired. That's what's going to happen with the scholarship. But who's offering those people a job? How are we keeping them in the space to become an actual part of the community, not just coming to a one-time show? And that's kind of what I've always loved about the E4 experience. This is a show that has no barriers, right? I lived in Houston when I first came to the E4 2016. I just had to get some gas money and drive up here, right? It was free. I knew I was going to be able to get some lunch. I was able to get some training. I was able to meet industry influencers, educators, and that right there is breaking barriers. I want to see more action to breaking down those barriers, but it's a long game. We're working our way towards it, and that's what I would like to see, get past the awareness, get more into a little bit more action now that people are more aware, right? It's no longer an excuse. Everybody's waking up.
Absolutely. And I would like to encourage our partners to look at internship programs, summer internship programs, training tracks programs that would attract and help train the next talent and focus on diversity within those programs. I know that we've done that at Exertis Almo, and we've been very enriched by a lot of our interns that have brought in different points of view and just energy and different ways of thinking, and it's a great investment all the way around, and that's personally what I would like to see the industry work towards.
Yeah, I want you guys to highlight that more. I was talking with the team earlier, James and Mick, and we were talking about how a lot of the people who come into Exertis Almo aren't people that were traditionally in AV, most of the people, right? They were in other aspects and other fields, and I think that's something that should be highlighted because that's how we create pipeline, right? And you guys are actively doing that and retaining them as well. It's not like you guys have a higher turnover, right? It seems like everybody here is growing and staying and growing into bigger positions. I mean, Rob, you're a perfect example of that, right? So I think you guys should talk more about that because that's amazing work that you're doing internally, and other companies can mimic and mock that to retain that new talent.
I just wanted to add, you're right. We need to move away from just raising awareness and taking those next steps, because an industry demographic, and this is gender-based, 85% male, 15% female within the industry, and that has remained relatively stagnant over the last couple of years. So how do we take those steps to make that change? And again, not just in gender, but in all aspects of diversity. And I think it's a great question. Obviously, the people who are here have an interest in DE&I, but we need to take it beyond this room out into the business and continue to drive that change across the industry.
Bravo, bravo. Any questions or comments from our attendees out there?
I have a question. I hear that all the time, and I work for a pretty large organization that owned by a very large company. How do you take that to the next step, as you said? Instead of just talking about it, how do we change it? How can I change it at my company? How can they change it at Toyota? I met her at the booth. How can we change it? Like, what can we do as individuals?
In my opinion, when a business has made the decision to create a diverse workforce and bring people in, first you have to make sure that, okay, great, you're hiring individuals and maybe you're trying to check a box, if you will, and a lot of programs start that way. You have to have your leaders, your team understand what inclusion means, that if you're bringing in diverse talent, you need to retain them because their needs are going to be different than everybody else within the organization. So I think it's education, and I know from a business standpoint, that's where we started, inclusive leadership. How do we create an environment where people feel that they can be their true selves at work? And then beyond that, it's not just recruiting from where you've always recruited. Like, if you want to change the demographics within a business, it has to be, okay, I could easily post on Indeed and I'm going to always get those individuals. I could always go to the local university, but maybe I should go to a black university and recruit from there. Or if I'm looking for accounting, maybe I should go to blackaccountants.com because they have an organization, or hispanicjobs.com, just diversifying what we're doing. And so those are some small things that we can do to start changing how we're looking for people. And then it's also putting in very specific goals that you want to obtain or attain, because if you don't have something that you're working towards, it more than likely isn't going to get done. So it's really easy to say, well, we want to be diverse. Well, how diverse do we want to be? What are we going to do? What smart goals are we putting in place to make our workforces more diverse?
No, that was a great answer. And when you say change, are you talking like change within our industry, change within your own company? Both? To piggyback on what Kim is saying, I think in the industry it takes amplifying each other's voices, right? So for instance, what's your specialty?
My job?
Yeah,
Audio.
audio. Okay. You should be a thought leader, just in my perspective, right? You have a unique perception of audio and how you sell it or educate people on that. You should be a thought leader in your company, right? Every year, we can go to a particular booth at any show and we see the same people. I think that should change. I think it should be rotation. Every other year, switch it up. There's been one year where I volunteered not to go and let somebody else go. Like, we need to start helping push each other to the forefront. Get some other voices and people into a rotation. And even if it's not at a show, social media is a big place for the AV community. If you just start engaging just a little bit, it makes a world of difference. And it takes us getting out of our comfort zones and then also working with other people to get out of their comfort zones. Me and Rob have been doing that for the last 3 years. Like, hey man, how can we make each other better? How can we amplify each other's voices? Like, what can we talk about? How can we collaborate? And I think that's where it starts. Each of us actively doing that, saying, hey, how can I help? How can I be more seen, or how can I help somebody else be heard, right? And I think that baby step is the right direction to create more change on a show floor or at an event or just across our community in general.
I was looking at a job situation where 10 most popular jobs for women and 10 most popular jobs for men. A lot of the men's are infrastructure, plumbing, welding, and stuff like that. And the women's is maybe education based or whatever. In my mind, a lot of times, I think we're trying to have more women in our industry, which is obviously what I think is what it's more kind of about. Do women really want to be in pro AV? Because are there really barriers? Because some of the largest companies are run by women. I'm sure microphones and Epistar and stuff like that. Are there barriers keeping women from, being 51% of our industry instead of 15%?
That's my favorite question. I'm so glad you asked that. That makes me just like want to just chop it up with you. You know what I'm saying? And see your perspective, right? But yes, women want to be in the industry. Yes, women want to make money. This is a very lucrative industry. But if you don't know about it, right? It's not like Spelman, for instance. It's not like Avixa's not going to Spelman saying, "Hey, you can get an AV CTES certification," right? Because this is a field that has been led by men for so long. So yes, there are female leaders. Listen Technologies also has a woman owner, right? But there's very few. I get that. And there are barriers, right? If you ever look at a install job, there's a weight limit. There's a weight requirement, right? I got into install because I just actively apply for things I don't qualify for. I'm gonna be straight up honest with you. I was like, I'm just gonna do this and see what happens. You know why? Because if I can at least get a seat in the room, then maybe I'll just meet somebody and make something happen. I am a finesser, right? But everybody doesn't go into it that way. There are barriers for women. On a basic like install job, you have to lift 51 pounds. You have to work 16-hour days, right? These are things that are very strategic for certain living situations. And that is a barrier, in my perspective.
So, I mean, a lot of what I got out of this is just being good practices, with the company and adhering to ADA compliance. Like I said, it just seems to be good practices. I'm just trying to figure out what gets measured, gets managed. You're talking about SMART goals, specific, measurable, action, realistic, and time-based, I guess is what it is. Yeah. What is the delta that you want that if you consider, okay, this company gets it. What is the measurement to where you can say these guys are right? When you look at the coverage within the company.
That's a great question, and they call it a diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. They use the word journey for a reason, because I can't say that if this company is at 50% male and 50% female, they get it, because you don't know if they have inclusive practices. You don't know how people within the business are feeling and sense of community, etc. And I think every business is going to be different because they are on a different path in their journey. Even within our organization, we have Exertis, or DCC Technology, has over 20 different entities that make up the business, and everybody is at a different part of their journey. And I think it's creating, in my opinion, it's creating communities where people have safe spaces to share who they are, to talk about, feel comfortable in their own skin, so to speak. It's creating, open door environments where managers understand any barriers that they may have within their role. And it's also not looking at, you mentioned roles and maybe installers are doing one thing and women are doing another educational piece. I think it's looking past that too, and not assuming that because we've historically seen men in a role or women in a role, that's where they want to be. It's opening it up and looking at transferable skills that will help to diversify our workforces. I'm not sure if I answered the question 100%, but.
Yeah, it's not like saying, oh, this company is doing right because it's 50% women, or there's 50% black people, or there's 50% Hispanics, whatever the case, right? That's just numbers, honestly. It's about the culture. Does everybody have equity? I don't know if you've seen that picture that's going around on like LinkedIn lately, where there's a fence, there's 3 boxes. Exactly. Well, let's talk about pay gap. Is every woman being paid the same as a man, right? Like equity across the board is success, not necessarily stats and numbers, in my opinion. And equity for every company and every person is technically could be perceived differently. So when you're going into this from a company perspective, you have to look at it and say, okay, what is equitable? What is equity to us? Is it all men and women being paid equal? Is it having 50% African American and Hispanic and white? Like, what is equity within a company, and how does that affect the business?
To me, it sounds like you're having equity is different for this company and equity is different for this company, right?
And I'm just going to jump in, because equity can be pay equity, but it can also be what I need to do a job equal to Alesia may be different because, say for example, I have an unknown ability, a different ability that she has. And there was a great story, and I shared this in Boston too, and I didn't quite get it right, but I'm going to try and get it right today. So say, for example, 3 people show up to work on their first day, and everybody is given a pair of size 6 shoes. That's equal. Everybody is given equal shoes to do their job. But I have a size 12 foot. That's not going to help me. That's not, I need equity, and equity means creating a level playing field where I get the size that I need in order to be as successful as the person who has a size 7. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So equity is not necessarily different for each company, right? Equity is, they're starting at different places in different companies, I think, right? That's what I think. You have to start somewhere, and each company is picking a section to start at, if that makes sense. It's not necessarily different. Just different companies and different people are approaching it in different slices of the pie. And I think you have to start somewhere to even start.
Dan?
So I guess it's kind of a comment that's going to lead to a question. I think one of the challenges with DEI, not only in our industry, but broadly, is I think many people view it kind of as an abstraction. Like they view it as like, well, that's a good thing. We want to create equity, but they don't really understand the strategic benefit of it. They don't understand how it goes beyond a feel-good. Does anyone on the panel want to talk about the idea that, you know, homogenous boardrooms and homogenous decision-making tables oftentimes lead to homogenous thinking, and the benefits of having different life experiences, different lived realities? The idea that you have women of color, LGBTQ people, people of different religions, people of different educational attainment levels, they're going to make better decisions because there's going to be a diversity of perspectives in the room, and you're going to avoid that groupthink or that homogenous thinking.
You're going to be on the next panel.
You nailed it.
You're absolutely right. Diversity of thought is tremendous in driving a business forward. And I wrote down stats because I can never remember exactly all of them, but I will share with you some of the stats. So diverse companies are 70% more likely to capture new markets. 80% of companies today can't afford to not be diverse or focus in on diversity because companies employing an equal number of men and women produce 40% higher revenue. So you're right, and diversity again is not just gender, it's LGBTQ, it's race, it's so many, it's diversity of thought, it's so much more than that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, different perspectives in a group of collaboration, it just opens up the conversation a lot more to different outcomes, I think. If you get in a room with all the same people that are like you, then yeah, you're going to have similar ideas, similar goals, and similar approaches. You diversify that conversation with different people, different views, and different outlooks, then the outcome can be a lot different and ultimately pushes the goal forward.
I think we've done a really good job of talking about some of the macro trends about DEI, but wanted to ask specifically on a really micro niche individual level, what are some of the things that people can do to actually live this out, right? Is it me going and teaching at a college, or me going and speaking a session, or me bringing my friends in? What are some of the micro tangible things that we can do as an industry to continue to serve?
I would just say on like a really basic level, and I know you're saying a lot of this starts with some of the trade associations, but you know, supporting the Avixa Women's Council. There's lots of local chapters. You know, be a male voice that goes there and says, you know, hey, we have internship positions available at my media company. I'm interested in hiring people of diverse thought and gender, and you know, go and recruit, you know, some of those young ladies or people from the diversity council, or you know, that's like real actionable things that you could do, or just go talk about the AV industry and what it's all about and how to get involved. What a great career it is. You know, I think, you know, this is something I felt like that I could do, you know, at our event that could bring some awareness and with these great people, and you know, this is a real opening up a real tangible conversation about the issues. But there's small things that you can do, And I think we should also applaud the men in the industry who have lifted up and promoted a lot of women. I mean, they're behind a lot of things that have transpired in this industry. I'm going to call out Sam, because when Maureen and I were both VPs of marketing at Electrograph, all 4 of the sales VPs that Sam hired were women. And this was back a while back. I won't say how far back. 2007. And the 4 VPs were all women. That was...
Did you do that on purpose, Sam? Like, you just hired the best person for the job?
Yeah. And I think that's how it should be. You should hire the best person for the job, but we should have a diverse panel of candidates, and that oftentimes doesn't happen. You know, one thing that everybody in this room could do, you all have connections, you know people, you could sponsor underrepresented individuals within your business to raise them up and introduce them to your contacts, to make them known within the business. And I think when I look at my career, I had a sponsor, which is different than a mentor. A mentor is going to give you suggestions and let you do it on your own. A sponsor is going to bring you to a meeting. A sponsor is going to introduce you to the right people to get you noticed, more visible within an organization. So I would say sponsorship would be the first easiest step that every person in this room could do.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's all about educating yourself, but being willing to educate yourself. I will be the first to admit I know a little about neurodiversity because of life experiences, but when it comes to overlapping with my career, I'm constantly learning about it, and simply being willing to go online or join different panels and groups, it allows me to understand more when I walk into an office and I think that lighting's going to be really bad for somebody who's on the autism spectrum, or somebody might love Barco ClickShare because of how easy it is, or these AKG headphones are great because they go over your ears and drown out the noises. There's little tendencies like that I've all of a sudden become more aware of, simply because of being willing to take a few minutes in my downtime, research it a little more, be interested in it. And if it wasn't for the panels and these councils, we've talked about, there's a local autism research company in South Jersey that my wife's school does a lot of recruiting at and things like that. So, excuse me. So that's really what to me it's all about. It's the little things.
Yeah. I mean, Ben, you have a platform that you stop. You were on his platform. Come on, look at Mr. Big Shot up here. Now he doesn't even remember the platform. See how he does this? But no, on a serious note, like, you have a platform, right? Actively reach out to people who you have not spoken to, right? Or people that are not the normal people in the conversations, right? Like, that's what I did over the last years. It was like, oh, Alicia, we want you to be on this because you're every piece of diversity. And I'm like, oh, great. There's got to be other people, right? And then I started thinking to myself, like, man, I don't know much people of color or other young women or whatever the case was, so I started actively seeking these people out in the industry. You don't necessarily see them at a show because there might be field technicians, they might be designers, right? The salespeople go to the show, right? So it's like, it's weird because you don't always get to see people who are behind the scenes, and it takes the active work of doing that. It's not easy, but I mean, you're doing it, right? You're taking action, and I think that's what people want to see is action. Like your scholarship, that's something that you are gonna help change somebody's life by going to a show. But something that's so simple is just bring people to an E4, register them. Like, let's go to a high school. Maybe there's a STEM program somewhere. Maybe there's a high school in a maybe a more urban area. Bring them to an E4 show. It's free. Sign them up. Sign them up yourself with one of your fancy codes or something, like simple things. Just actively engaging and have more conversations like this. It doesn't always have to be on a grand stage. You and I were talking yesterday. Dan and I, we always have conversations on the side. I think it's just this gentleman in the back is probably going to be my new friend just because I want to have conversations with him off stage, like just get different perspectives, right? And that's what it's about. That's how we encourage change moving forward in the future. And that's goes back to my initial statement, is it takes each of us taking on the responsibility, not just Exertis Almo, not just Avixa, not just, the Diversity Council. We each have to make up our minds to be active participants in trying to create this change. And I think we're all doing it in our own unique ways.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.